Last time I saw Mike Yam was in Las Vegas at the Pac-12 basketball tournament on Wednesday, and then for just a second, we had a nice little conversation, and then we went about our business, and then everything changed hours later. So Mike Yam joins us right now from his palatial estate in downtown San Francisco, joining us right here on the Bill Riley Show. Hey, Yam, how are you?
All 730 square feet in San Francisco. It is palatial for SF standards. I'll give you that. Man, I got to tell you, it's good to hear your voice just because I feel like, and I've done this occasionally over the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure you have, where you connect with friends, phone calls, Zoom sessions, and it's just nice to be reminded that you do have a little bit of a circle outside of, what's immediately surrounding you in your apartment. And so it's good to hear your voice. And it does feel like that conversation we had before the Oregon State-Utah game might have been 10 years ago at this point.
Certainly feels like at least 3 years ago, if not 3 months ago, that's for sure. So are you able, you're in right the heart of San Francisco. You're right downtown. How much have things changed there? I know, the things have loosened up a little bit everywhere, but, are you able to get out, walk around, do some normal stuff? Are you still pretty much on lockdown in downtown?
It's mostly a lockdown, but, we were the first major city in the country, I think, to really lock it down, and I think we're going to be the last to open. I still haven't had a haircut in months, and I've already scheduled first available appointment, which is July 13th in the city to get that haircut. So, I'm freaking out from that perspective, but, it's like I said, it's been slow. People are slowly getting out there a little bit more. To be honest with you, I had protesters right outside of my apartment on Saturday, and luckily it was peaceful. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't at least a little bit of nervous energy just watching the news, and I probably spent too much time doing that and just wondering how it was going to end. They were trying to get onto the highway. I live pretty close to the highway and the Bay Bridge in San Francisco, and luckily, like I said, peaceful protest and appreciate that in a big way. But yeah, slowly but surely starting to open up here.
Well, that's good. At least you can get out and do a few things and not be just kind of sequestered inside because you live in such a beautiful place. It's a shame when you can't get out and enjoy it, especially this time of year.
Yeah. Are you guys able to? I always think of Salt Lake, which I love visiting, and Park City, which is amazing. Are you guys able to do some stuff?
Oh, yeah. We haven't been on house lockdown. Last weekend, we actually had it pretty bad. I live about a mile and a half from downtown, and there was peaceful protesting, and then there were rioters. I like to draw that line of distinction, Mike. There were some really good peaceful protesters that were doing their thing up and around the Capitol, and then downtown, only where our studios are right here and where you usually stay downtown, about a block and a half from here, there were looters and rioters and people that flipped over some cars and some police cars and set them on fire. So, the helicopters and things were circling, late Saturday afternoon. The mayor shut down. They put a curfew into effect for about 36 hours. She was going to extend it for a full week. They had the National Guard kind of downtown guarding some of the buildings. Then she lifted that yesterday because things have calmed down here a little bit. Again, there's a difference. The folks that were peacefully protesting were doing it the right way, and then there were the people that were just trying to cause the mayhem, and they were the ones that I think caused some of that reaction. So, you don't think of it here in Salt Lake City, a pretty lily-white city without a lot of minority population, but we had a little bit of it here for a few days. Now, we've had the protesters all week, and that's been fine, and that's been good, but as far as the other stuff with the COVID, we never went on full lockdown here, and we kind of got ahead of the curve a lot like the Bay Area did, and our numbers in this state have been relatively tame. We've had a couple of spikes here and there, but as far as deaths and hospitalizations, we've been really good. And I think people, for the most part, have paid attention. They avoided the mass gatherings for the most part for a couple of months, and so the restrictions have eased here quite a bit. And here, there's so much outdoors to do with the national parks and the mountains and the hiking that people have still been able to get outside. And that's one of the advantages here. There's so much open space right outside the city that people have been able to socially distant and still been able to get outside a little bit.
Yeah, that's big time. Look, it's beautiful up there, and I'm glad that you're making the distinction between the protesters who are peaceful and the people that are looting, which is just not great and obviously unsafe. And it can get dangerous, and you just don't want innocent people to get hurt. And I think even if you take it take it even further, you think about COVID-19 and all the businesses that have been shut down and not able to operate. And then all of a sudden, some of those businesses, at least here in the Bay Area, have been destroyed, physical damage, the looting, people that have just kind of wreaked havoc. So definitely not the message that I think a lot of people want to see. And I've talked to a lot of people that are kind of in the throes of it. Yesterday, I actually had an opportunity to talk to Byron Scott, who made the same distinction that you did. He called them knuckleheads, and then versus the people that are really trying to affect some sort of change.
Yeah, and I've said this too. I know people talk about peaceful protests. I'm not a person that believes protests have to be peaceful. They can't be violent, but you're allowed to be. The reason you're protesting is you're pretty emotional, you're pretty riled up about it. It's okay to be emotional and angry in a protest. You just can't cross that line of being violent. And for the most part, I don't think that's been the case here. And I really don't think it's been the case around the country, most of the places. I think we've seen a lot of very good protesting. It's just, as Byron said, I'll use this term too, and knuckleheads. Those are the people that have kind of given the people that are trying to do it the right way in a peaceful or at least orderly manner a bad name.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the appropriate way to come up with the distinction of what's happening. And it's, it really is a shame it gets to the point, and I feel it, where if you have been subjected to any sort of discrimination, you feel like, well, geez, there's been other protests. I mean, that was one thing that I asked Byron, and I had the same conversation with Earl Watson the other day. Like, what are the things that need to take place so there is sustained change? I mean, Bill, you and I both lived through, protests and situations where minorities, African-American males, wrongly imprisoned, physically attacked, killed in the situation with George Floyd. And you see this immediate outcry and outrage, which is great, but then it kind of drops off a little bit. So how do you, and I'm not saying, hey, we need protests every week for the next 10 years. All I'm saying is, how is there going to be a set of standards that's now created coming off of this tragedy that we can use moving forward?
Yeah, and that's the key, is finding what that is to be sustained, because you want the message to continue to be there, but how do you do it to where it doesn't become white noise or something that people don't pay enough attention to? And I hope, I really do believe this. I think sports has a great platform to do it. And I don't know that sports has always been in a great place. And I know, you could take shots and whatever at leagues and whatever, but I think the here and now, I think maybe the climate in the country is now, I think if these commissioners and these owners and these front offices read it the right way, if they're doing more than just, virtue signaling on social media, if they're actually willing to do it, I think sports can be a place to do that if we're willing to allow athletes and coaches and organizations to do it the right way. And to me, if you do it in an organized fashion where you have a plan to do it, you don't have two guys that want to do it and then others that don't. If there's a organized message behind it and the entire organization or league gets behind it, to me, that can be a great beacon for it, Mike, in many ways.
Agreed. I mean, you and I, look, we've made our living around sports, and I think you and I both have a really clear understanding of just how powerful that vehicle can be. I always say it's a common language in this country. You can talk sports, and sure, there's rivalries. You're not rooting necessarily. Utah fans aren't exactly cheering for BYU, but there's some commonality there where, when it comes to some big picture social issues, I think we can use sport and the platform that a lot of leagues and athletes have to really affect some change. And look, at the end of the day, we live in the greatest country on the planet, and it affords us the right to be able to disagree. And you know what? Like, I might not agree with, someone's stance, but look, they can have that stance. We can have a dialogue. I think when that dialogue breaks down, that's when problems start to arise. And I think the bigger issue is, like, how do you have some sort of level of empathy? I think about my friends, one of my best friends who I worked with at ESPN. We were texting last night and we got on the phone, and he's got two young boys and they're black. And I said, how is that conversation? He goes, man, it's just so hard to, they're so young and they ask these questions, and it's hard not to cry when you're worried about what's going to happen 5-10 years from now when you're not around to hold their hand and help protect them. And I think you don't need to be any ethnicity. If you're a parent you would, and I'm not, but God, my heart breaks for people that are in that situation. Like, of course you love your kid. And like, I think right there's a commonality. What's different about the love that you have as a parent if you're white or black or Hispanic or Asian? I mean, that's a common theme here. And I think if you can put yourself in someone else's shoes in that situation, I think that would help maybe level the playing field in terms of that conversation.
I don't know, and I think you make a good point. I don't know if you can always put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's hard to live somebody else's experience.
Sure,
I can't live your experience of being Asian. You can't live mine of being white. I can't live my friend Tony Jones's of being black. But I've been saying this, and I kind of use the Drew Brees situation yesterday as an example. I think we are very quick to condemn. And to me, and I'm not saying I'm not excusing what Brees said. I think he was very tone deaf yesterday. I don't think it makes him a bad person or a racist. People are trying to paint him with that brush. I don't think that's the case at all. His actions over the years, to me, I'm an action person, Mike. Your actions and how you treat people speak louder than a comment or words do. But I think he didn't read the room and the situation very well, and he was tone deaf. But what I would like to see, because I'm old enough to have lived in a time where there wasn't an internet, and I'm old enough to have lived in a time when there weren't cell phones, where you actually had to pick up a phone and call somebody or walk up to their door and knock on it to have a conversation with them. I would have loved to have seen Michael Thomas, Drew Brees' number one target and teammate, and Michael Jenkins, his teammate and safety, before they exploded on social media, to have actually picked up the telephone, because I'm pretty sure they all have each other's phone numbers, and said, what the hell were you talking about, man? Have an angry conversation with him, but he's your teammate and somebody you know very well. Then if you didn't like what he had to say to you, maybe then you take to social media, or maybe you take to social media after you have it. But to me, we go to 0 to 100. There's no in between, and there's no conversation had. Now, you know, a lot of people out there yesterday don't have Drew Brees' phone number, but Michael Jenkins and Michael Thomas, I'm 99% sure, have his digits in their phone. I just think we've lost the ability today to have conversations with people. It's okay to have an angry conversation, but to have any conversation instead of just making wild platitudes. And that's where I'm saying, you know, I can't walk in your shoes, but I can sure listen to you. And I can listen to why you're upset and angry about something and listen to a differing viewpoint. It's okay to be different. It's okay. Drew Brees is okay to have his viewpoint and somebody, but listen and communicate as to why that upsets somebody else. And I think that puts us in a better place instead of just immediately reacting and getting angry about everything.
Look, I agree with what you're saying, that conversation needs to take place. And you're right, his teammates, you know, they have Drew's digits. And I did see an apology that he released earlier today.
Sure.
The exact wording of it and all those types of things. But you're right. Look, you had said something, and it struck a chord with me, where you said, hey, like, I don't know what it's like to be an Asian American or to be African American in this country. And you're 100% right. But I want to circle back to what you said about sport and using it as a vehicle. Like, we've all seen 42, the movie, right?
Yep.
So you're thinking about Jackie Robinson, and there's this scene, and my God, like, it makes me sound like a little bit of a softie, but there's a scene where he gets out onto the field, and his teammates, they won't play catch with him. And I still get chills a little bit when I think about that, and it's an emotional thing, because you and I played sports, right? And I get not everyone plays sports, but my God, your teammates, like, it's such a cool thing to be in a unit and to get your teammates back, really, and to see a guy. Teammates wouldn't play catch with him because he's black. Like, my heart just breaks for someone in that type of situation. And granted, things have changed, right, where the predominant number of athletes, professional athletes, are African American. You know, so they're not necessarily having those issues, but they're having different issues. And I think if you can see that, hey, man, that's a horrible situation where his teammate doesn't have his back and they're shunning him. You know, it's the same thing in society. If you're able to make those comparisons and link those things, I think it's easier to have that empathy that I was talking about, and understanding, not a true understanding because you don't live in those shoes, but get closer to that understanding of what that person's dealing with.
I've never been a minority anywhere I've lived. I've lived in places where there was more diverse culture, certainly, than where I live right now. But growing up, I was always the predominant ethnic place. I was, you know, the white guy. I'm just curious, as an Asian, I mean, have you felt outward or directed discrimination or racism in your life in places you've lived, or is most of it kind of subtle and kind of under the radar or passive aggressive?
Yeah, it's never been, it was something that I wrote because being in shelter in place and quarantine, I got a little bit more time to think. And I wrote about this the other day where I've never feared for my safety. And not that I fear now with COVID-19, but I do feel there's been some attacks on the Asian American community, and I'm a little bit more mindful. I haven't had the experiences like my college roommate who's black, he's walking home with one of our other black friends, and one's 6'3", the other's 5'6", and cops pull them over, or as they're walking home, cops get in front of them, draw their guns on them, and they say that they both fit the description of someone who just committed a crime. They couldn't look more different, just in terms of physical stature. And, situations like that, like I've never experienced that before, so I don't know what that is like. But it's confusing. It's scary. The people that you care about, you don't want something bad to happen to them. But yeah, I've felt it. I think with the Asian American community, it's not as direct. It's a little bit more indirect. And sure, I've heard the racist comments before. I mean, hell, I've had people, tweet me some things that, I'm sure they wouldn't say to my face. And if they did, we might have some fun with that one in person. But to me, I really do feel like, Bill, at the end of the day, most people in this country are really good-natured, supportive people that don't want to see violence, don't want to see discrimination take place. The problem is, how do you unify that group? And I think that's been part of maybe a lack of the education for a lot of people that haven't faced it before. I think that's one of the steps to take place to try to equalize things a little bit.
Mike Yam, our friend from the Pac-12 Network's with us here for just a couple more minutes on ESPN 700. All right, a quick pivot. There's no easy transfer, but let's go to sports for a minute. Was there ever?
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
Let me ask you, do you feel optimistic? Do you feel good about football happening this fall?
Yeah,
so do I.
Do not. How crazy is it, man? You mentioned a couple months ago was the last time we saw each other and we saw live sports take place. And I think as we creep closer with, things at least on the table with baseball, I don't know if that's going to happen, but certainly with the NBA now announcing that they're going to come back, it feels like a century ago where Kirk Herbstreit in the moment says, hey, I don't think there's going to be a college football season. And in that moment, I kind of, I thought that was a possibility. I thought that was a realistic possibility. And now as things change, what did you say the countdown was? 91 days?
91 days, 13 weeks from today, Utah and BYU.
God, can you imagine? In 13 weeks, man, you and I are going to be talking a little college football. Like, to me, that's awesome. I do think there's some big picture questions. I think, what do you do in terms of the testing? I've talked to a couple people on a few of our campuses. The cost of the testing is pretty significant. What's interesting is everyone's seen the nasal swab that's out there. Talked to Dr. Stephanie Chu when we were doing a podcast at Pac-12 Network, and she's a physician in Colorado for CU, but is also part of the NCAA advisory board on this. And she said the testing's about $100 a pop. Talked to someone on another campus, and they said, yeah, that test is $100 a pop. We're looking at the test that's $350 because you get the results back in 15 minutes. Problem with that test, it's only 80% accurate. So, and they're trying to do that weekly. And on the football side, they're talking about 200 people in their building that would need to be tested once a week. So once again, I think there's a financial element of this that still needs to be figured out. What do you do if someone tests positive on a team? The NBA, at least according to ESPN, they had made reference to this last night. They'd take the positive test of the player with that, quarantine them, and then everyone else would play on. Like, I would imagine the NCAA/Power Fives and individual schools maybe do something pretty similar to that. But once again, Bill, I think the biggest thing is, like, these are not paid athletes like NBA players with, hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars on the line. I think it is a little bit different when you talk about student athlete. But once again, I think we're creeping closer to some sort of solution. So, yeah, I'm definitely confident we get football.
No, I'm 99.9% sure, because I've always maintained there was a better chance of it happening than not happening. The economic ramifications. Yeah. Utah alone would lose $57 million in the university without having it. Yeah. That would crater athletic departments. Oregon State this morning, we haven't even gotten to not having football. We're going to have it. They laid off 23 people in their athletic department this morning at Oregon State. Yeah. 23 people that had jobs in the athletic department, and we haven't even reached football yet. You need to have it. It's going to happen, Mike. As far as the testing goes, I feel a lot better about these athletes being tested than the rest of society. I haven't been tested. I'm coming to work every day. I'm not symptomatic or anything like that. I'm on the honor system to stay home. These kids are going to get tested 2 and 3 times a week and get their temperatures checked every time they come in facilities to work out.
Yep.
I'm with Larry Scott. They're going to have some of the best medical professionals in all of America at these campuses taking care of them. And the fact of the matter is, people are going to test positive. They may be asymptomatic. They may not show any symptoms, but, we're talking about 18 to 24-year-old athletes, depending on what campus you're on, that are not in a high-risk group, that are finely tuned athletes that are going to have the best medical treatment if they do test positive. So I don't worry about those kids at all, and I frankly don't worry about a lot of the kids on these campuses because I think a lot of good protocols are going to be put in place. I think the season has to happen. I just wonder, are we going to start on time? And I've gone under the auspice that we are until somebody tells me otherwise. My big question now is just simply going to be, will there be fans or won't there be fans?
I don't think there's fans. I think it's super limited on the fan side. I think that is not a this season thing. It's just my gut.
See, I think it's going to. I think it's going to be regional, Mike. I really do. I think here in Utah, there's a very good chance we'll see them. But I think maybe where you're at in the Bay Area, maybe there's a chance we don't see them.
Yeah, and I think it's when I say fans, I mean people that will be able to on a regular basis go to these games as opposed to family members, because I think you'll see family in small pockets. But you're right. Like if you said to me, hey, the majority of the schools in the Pac-12, will they have fans? I would say no. Majority of fans in the SEC, I would say yes. And Big 12 schools, Big 10, depending on where they are. I just think as you watch things open up from a society standpoint in what areas of the country, I think those areas might be a little bit more liberal in allowing fans as opposed to on the West Coast, where I think there's been more of a cautious standpoint on reopening. So I think there's a little bit of, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think regionally, what's the government officials say about what's going to be allowed? And I think that's still always going to be, it's a non-starter. If the government says no, it's just not going to happen. And I think schools, to your point, in terms of the money, just want it. They'll take the hit on the ticket sales. And look at a school like Utah, where the fans do show up and there is a passion and excitement for their athletic programs, which is terrific. They'll probably take a little bit more of a financial hit than some other schools that don't draw as well as Stanford or as Utah, but to me, I still think it's going to come down to what the government officials say.
Have you guys begun having any meetings or discussions in-house about coverage of football this fall?
Yeah, those conversations are slowly but surely taking place. And Bill, I wish I could tell you I was in the know on a lot of those. We have a daily call every morning, and we get filled in on some stuff. And I think it's still just a lot of unknowns that are in place. But the plans are on Saturdays. Yeah, as long as there are games, Pac-12 Network is going to have everyone covered.
That's very good. Have they just again, maybe it's too soon to know. Have talked about being on site, or would they be calling from studio?
Yeah, I think the broadcasters right now, the initial plan is to have them do the games, but that could have changed this morning, and I just won't be able to, to really know. It's such a fluid situation.
Well, yeah, I think it might be too soon to know, really, to be honest, if they're going to do that. I think there's still, 91 days. I think that's one of those decisions that you can wait 3 or 4 weeks out to determine if you're going to do it or not.
Yeah, and look, Major League Baseball said their crews are going to be calling them from home when their respective teams are on the road. I think it's a little different. I think they had cited sort of an older demographic in terms of the analysts and whatnot, and a safety issue. But I think it's a point to just know. Either way, at least in our situation at Pac-12 Network, like even if they're not going to the games, there's going to be some sort of travel, right? Like they still have to head to San Francisco, where our headquarters are, to be able to broadcast it from here. I don't foresee a situation where the announcers, what are they doing? It over Zoom? Like I don't think that happens. So, but I could be wrong, man, because technology is crazy. So maybe there is some sort of tech that would allow for something like that. I'm not aware.
But when you're aware, you'll make us all aware, right? Yeah.
Oh, 100%, man. Are you kidding me? It would be the first phone call that I make.
Well, I'm still waiting to find out, too, but I'm assuming that if the games happen, I'll be there, because it's hard to do them if you're not there. And the other thing, too, with football is, as you said, you're going to have to travel them to San Francisco. If you're going to fly everybody to San Francisco, wouldn't you just as soon fly them to Boulder or to Salt Lake City, too? Because you can isolate and things like that. And there's only You're talking about 12 games. The baseball thing I understand because it's also a cost savings things for some of these networks for baseball with there being so many games. With football, you're talking about 2 nights. You're talking about 1 night, 2 nights. You're talking about limited number of games and things like that. So I can see the cost benefit on the baseball side of it, but on the football side of it, maybe not quite so much.
No, I'm with you on that one. I'm totally with you on that. And I do think that every network, generally speaking, will be trying to figure out ways to cut costs. I mean, that's just abundantly clear. You open up a newspaper or see trade magazines. I mean, a lot of networks, especially the ones with sports, have lost hundreds of millions of dollars over the last couple of months because of COVID. So I would just imagine that they're going to be pretty creative in trying to save a couple bucks.
Let's be fair. Have you ever worked anywhere where they don't want to save a little bit of money? Everybody's trying to save some money, right?
Yeah. How many times have you? We need to get lean here. We need to get lean. When is that not the case? Everyone always cries that they don't have the cash. I've heard that story before.
Exactly. Hey, be safe. It's great catching up with you. Give everybody there my best, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks, Mike.
Absolutely. Take care.